of new growth. It was a rainy spring day, and although she could not smell it, if she squeezed her eyes shut, she could imagine it, and she adored the smell of rain. "What are you doing, Vivian?" His voice startled her, broke her reverie, sent her head darting toward the doorway. The sudden movement caused the bandage at her throat to throb. Her hand fluttered to it absently. She knew there would be a face print on the glass advertising her guilt. He stood only a step or two into the room, his height and girth filling the space, stealing the air, and redefining the geometry to accommodate his mass. Even 10 feet away, even standing, she felt small. He did not move further. He just crossed his arms over his massive barrel chest and waited. Obediently, she stepped away from the window, and as soon as she did, she missed it. Every face that passed had a story. Every closed door she saw there held mystery. Every shuttered window encapsulated another life. "You can't just spend all afternoon daydreaming at that damn window. Now come fix lunch. I have work to get back to." His voice boomed in the small space, and she hurriedly stepped toward him. But he blocked the doorway, and when he did not step away, she tried to push past him out the door. His arm shot out and stopped her. His massive hand encircled her entire bicep. She was aware of his strength without him having to squeeze. Even now, when he was trying to be gentle, his hand was a vice. He simply wasn't built for gentleness. His every movement was a threat, purposeful or not. No kiss? She avoided his eyes and looked past him back out the window. He waited, his fingers tensing on her arm. Finally, she nodded, turned her head, and she stared at his bulbous nose, ruddy and pitted, and his fleshy lips. Those lips would be womanish if they were on a softer face. She puckered and pecked, trying to be as efficient as possible, but he pulled her in, and he pinned her with his arms, and his mouth opened, tongue darting out past his lips and into hers. His stubble scraped her cheeks raw, and his mouth tasted sour. When he released her and she nearly fell back, he mistook it for a swoon and smiled wolfishly. Moments later, he was in the doorway to the kitchen. He watched as she set out the bread, leered as she stacked meat and cheese, grinned as she ladled soup into a small bowl and placed it on the table. He settled in, smacking his lips, and tucked a napkin into the collar of his dress shirt. She stood in the farthest corner of the room, her back nearly touching the blisteringly hot radiator. He ate, unquietly, and grumbled when he realized she had not provided him a drink. 2 large glasses of milk later, and he was up, burping and patting his stomach, then rubbing his entire face with the napkin like a towel. "That was lovely. Never thought I'd like having a wife at all. But I'm so glad I found you, Viv." She dropped her gaze and nodded. He kissed her on her head and strode out, the pots and pans jangling as his great weight passed by. When she heard the front door close and his footfalls on the sidewalk, she released the breath she'd been holding in. That night she tossed and turned. Nights were always the hardest for her. Every night he forced her to go to bed with him early. She was a night owl and spent most nights lying there, staring at the ceiling. She knew he feared her alone and awake in the house while he slept, and he did not trust her. He would not admit it, but she could tell. If she so much as wanted a glass of water, he would grumble suspiciously and come along. Something in her knew he shouldn't trust her. But the thoughts skittered away like shadows meeting light. She tugged at her bandage and tried to find a comfortable spot. Small, persistent thoughts circled in her head. He knew enough stories to be wary. She tossed and turned, too hot, too cold, entangled in bed sheets, and always his great weight, like a fallen log, pressing her into the mattress. She could hear the night sounds outside the window, fire trucks tearing through the silence, lone footsteps of predator and prey, cats in heat yowling, and she longed to be out in it. She longed to feel the soft caress of moonlight on her skin, the wind in her hair, the vastness of the sky. She had forgotten how long it had been since she'd been outside at all. Her dreams were always filled with flying. She'd soar through the indigo skies, streaking above the sea. Her reflection always raced her below in the dark water, and she'd dip down close enough to run her fingertips through the waves and feel its inky spray. She'd luxuriate in the wildness, and she was weightless and unfettered. Then she would wake with tears on her cheeks, an ache in her heart, and the phantom salt air dissipating in her nostrils as the dream faded. It wasn't always this way. She remembered only fragments, but there had been a life before this one, a life where she laughed. She had faint creases at her eyes, laugh lines, so surely there must have been a time when she was filled with laughter. There must have been laughter enough to etch it into her face. But her memories were fireflies blinking in and out and eluding her capture, and the more she tried to remember, the more the pain at her throat forced her to forget. And I'll leave it there.
All right, cool. So we have actually two no-shows. So Brendan Vito is up next. Where are you? His story is really sexy and really disturbing. So enjoy that. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Brendan Vidito. Please excuse the Canadian accent. So my story is called Stag Loop. In terms of inspiration, I read 2 views of a cadaver room, and somehow it led to this. Amanda found the film in the discount bin at the adult video store. The case insert was missing. Only a pale strip of masking tape scrawled with the words Stag Loop served to identify its contents. She bought it for $3 along with a handful of more legitimate-looking DVDs as a gift for her and her boyfriend Logan. When she returned home, the sharp, icy fingers of winter had dragged the sun into an early grave. The house was muted in shadow. The only sound was the rumble of Logan snoring upstairs. Amanda followed it to the bedroom. Nix was curled up at the foot of the mattress, purring ecstatically, and regarded Amanda with her golden green eyes. Amanda scooped the animal into her arms, turned to face the cheval mirror behind the door, and studied her reflection. Enough moonlight crept through the slit in the curtains to sketch out one side of her body. The result looked something like a work of scratch art, fine strokes of silver against solid black. Nix appeared to grow out of her chest, the jagged tracery of her pelt gleaming like polished steel. "Look at those beautiful ladies," Amanda said and kissed the cat between the ears. She replaced Nix on the bed, searched the grocery bag of DVDs, pulled out the one marked Stag Loop, and slotted it into the player. Logan stirred. Amanda checked her watch. He was supposed to leave any minute for the graveyard shift. She crawled up beside him and breathed hot breath in his ear. "Time to swim up out of those dreams," she whispered. Her eyes switched to the television. The film was starting. The white flicker of damaged negative was replaced by a lingering shot of a 60s-era living room. The picture was yellowed and sepia and poorly lit. Amanda knew right away that it was a bad VHS transfer. The living room was furnished with a couch, garishly floral patterned, a coffee table with a white porcelain bowl in the middle, and an ugly Grecian urn off to one corner. A man with shoulder-length hair entered the frame. He waved impatiently to someone off camera. After a beat, the actress stumbled into the scene. Her hair was styled in a bob that framed her face in an inverted triangle. She wore a button-up dress and no bra, her breasts curved under the sheer fabric. Timidly, she approached her co-star and allowed him to undress her. After a mediocre blowjob, Amanda realized that vintage porn was closer to real life than the modern fare. They fucked on the couch. The scratchy background noise gave way to porn groove. Amanda let out a soft chuckle and recalled her attention to Logan. He groaned, threw an arm over his face, and Amanda rolled back the sheets to expose him to the night air. He was naked except for a pair of boxer briefs. His morning wood was more than a suggestion under the membrane of cotton. "What are you doing?" he said, his voice drunk with sleep. Amanda kissed him on the stomach. His skin was hard and soft, the light smattering of hair tickling her lips. She moved up to his chest, planting little kisses along the way. He made a noise halfway between a grunt and a moan. His arms slid away from his face and their lips met. They kissed gently at first, Logan still only half awake, and then grew more urgent, passionate. His breath was stale, but it did little to deter Amanda's affections. Over the lip-smacking and panting, the Stag Loop provided a comedic backdrop to their activities. Soon the music reached Logan's ears, piercing the blinders of his arousal. He laughed, a loud bark that sent vibrations down his stomach. "What is this shit?" he said, staring beyond her at the television. Amanda pulled away, lips plump and sheened in saliva, and followed his gaze. On screen, the woman had mounted the man in the cowgirl position, with her back facing the camera. She bounced up and down, throwing her head around in exaggerated paroxysms of pleasure. With a species of envy, Amanda noticed the beauty of the woman's back. Her shoulder blades stood out in sharp relief, softly pointed, sliding under the buttermilk skin with each thrust of her pelvis. A beauty mark fringed the slope of her right back dimple. At first, Amanda thought it was a discrepancy in the image, a scar in the negative, but then it moved in conjunction with the woman's flesh, startlingly black in that sepia world. "This porn is ancient," Logan said. "Where did you find it?" The adult store, Amanda said, eyes lingering on the screen. Don't worry, it wasn't expensive. I was going to say, amateur porn filmed in the dark looks better than this. This is just weird and creepy. Because it's old? Logan gestured toward the screen. It looks off. What are you talking about? Amanda propped her head in her hands. It's two average people having sex. He doesn't have an obscenely large dick and her tits aren't big enough to smother a grown man. They're normal. Logan shrugged. It's not that. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe it's the yellow tint or the shitty lighting. It makes her eyes especially, look empty. Maybe she was doped on something. Could be. This was the decade of peace and love, after all. Amanda playfully flicked Logan's cock. He flinched. Well, I think she's beautiful. For a ghost, maybe. Why would you say that? Logan wagged a knowing finger. I think I figured it out. The girl doesn't look real, but more like a cheap optical effect than actual flesh and blood. Amanda grinned. You're thinking way too hard about this. It's a fucking porno. Logan sighed. Yeah, you're right. Then in sleazy accent said, so how's about we bring our own porno to its natural conclusion? Amanda said nothing, only lowered herself back down on Logan, filling the room once again with the sounds of their passion. Meanwhile, on the television, the long-haired man came on his co-star's chest. The picture sputtered to black, to be followed by the second scene in the loop. It was dark, gray tones. 2 men and 1 woman were writhing on a bedspread veined with wrinkles. A distorted porn groove rendition of a church hymn played in the background. As the larger of the 2 men penetrated the woman from behind, Amanda and Logan were already naked and moving together between the disheveled and twisted sheets. Next.
Yeah.